Hi, Artist to Art. I'm Aaron Jack. We're going to be on with Bakery Square, Morton Brown. Morton Brown of Bakery Square bringing you artist opportunities. Thank you for joining. I appreciate you. I really do. I appreciate you coming on again, visiting one, visiting two, visiting three. Thank you. I appreciate you. I'm excited to bring you about the artist opportunities. That's really, I think, something special, like what we can learn as artists, what we can be here, be present, be here learning together. I'm really excited to learn together with you, ask questions. I really like it when you, the audience, ask questions. Ah, here we go. Here we go. Bakery Square. So, ask questions, Paul. Hey, there we go.
Hey.
We got it.
Great.
We got it.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. That's what we wanted. That's what we wanted. We got it. So, everyone's coming on here now.
Great.
Thank you. So, why don't you tell me a little bit of something? You work at Bakery Square. You work for Bakery Square, right? Besides your
for a number of weeks, I will be working for them as a consultant. But normally, no, I'm not a staff member. I'm just an independent public art consultant.
Wow, cool. And do you mostly work in the Pittsburgh area, or do you work in different places?
Yeah, mostly in Pittsburgh. I've lived here about 20 years, and I've been independent consultant now for about 4 or 5 years.
Wow, amazing. So right now, you just started doing this Bakery Square project. Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell me a little bit of something about it?
Yeah. Well, this project, we just launched it just a couple of weeks ago, as soon as January got here in the new year. Bakery Square staff called me a few months before that because of my work in the community and other community murals and running artist selection processes and stuff like that. So they wanted a model that was similar to what we did in the Sprout Fund years ago and what I recently did with Duolingo right down the street. And that is make a call for artists and have a local jury of community members, Bakery Square staff, and some art experts select artists out of that pool to interview and then hire one to make a piece of public art for a new building in Bakery Square. This building is called the Galley Building. So it's that little pink building that's there now, but they're sort of building onto it, renovating it, making it larger. And it's going to be hosting a lot of new restaurants, which is going to be cool. Kind of like it's the same group as like the Strip District Galley and the Federal Galley in the north side. Outdoor seating and all that kind of stuff. There is an inward facing facade of the building that faces into on one side is Penn Avenue. On the other side is the parking lot that you may know if you've been there. So this is going to face inward to the campus, 2 large panels, and the artist that's selected can be any kind of medium. So they came to me with this idea for a community mural, but we're actually allowing any type of artist to apply, and we're just going to see what we get. So it could be digital, it could be traditional mural, street artists, professional artists. Then after we sort of developed this program a little bit and working with the community, we realized Artist Residency Component would be interesting. Again, similar as to what we did at Duolingo down the street. So we've got 2 local elementary schools that will partner with us, Urban Academy and Lincoln Elementary. And the artist will be handed these 2 schools to work with. And it's going to be, a little bit strange because of COVID and all that kind of stuff. But with those 2 components, we're really wanting it to be a fantastic sort of experience for the community and local artists, international artists, anyone's eligible to apply. But we're hoping that it'll be a great boon to the community in any case.
Wow, that sounds exciting. And it's like $20,000, right?
Yeah, so it's 2 panels. The facade is broken up into 4 panels. and it's sort of like the back of house of the interior restaurants, if you can imagine. So there are windows that will be built into the building as they're building it now, but it's really sort of the back of the house, and you wouldn't want to see in it. Yeah, there's some images there. Mm-hmm. So right under what you're looking at there is the outdoor courtyard and sort of where you'll enter. Then if you look to the facade, there may be another image that might be better, but yeah, there you go. So those two sort of fake murals, if you will, in those panels, the vertical skinny panels, those are to be the art location. And so we've got those two panels on the end, and then the middle section, those larger windows, that's sort of the back of the house area where the restaurants will sort of be making the food. And that will sort of be blocked off sort of permanently or semi-permanently. So the artwork is intended to primarily inhabit those two panels on the flanking the center windows, but we will allow some sort of interaction in or on top of those center windows as well. So that's sort of where the budget range is $20,000 to $30,000. So if you just hit those two panels, that's a maximum of $20,000. If you do something to sort of connect across those larger windows, we would allow up to $30,000. And, you know, the thinking there is like, you know, digital artists, sculptors, you know, installation artists of any kind. I mean, they might want to sort of really get inspired by this sort of unusual space and sort of make use of those center windows. So we're really allowing for just about anything to sort of come our way.
Wow. What is the feeling behind this at Bakery Square? Like, what are they inspired by, is your feeling?
Well, I'm not really sure, you know, if they're inspired by any one thing. I think that, you know, at least when they called me, I think there was just this general spirit of giving back to the community. After, I mean, if you think about it, after COVID and after all the George Floyd protests, especially in this neighborhood, you know, this is actually in the Larimer neighborhood, but it abuts East Liberty, and Target is right down the way where a lot of the protests were happening a few weeks ago. I think it just really touched people, touched people all over the world, but it touched people specifically, I think, you know, in the East End of Pittsburgh, because this is the area, you know, where a lot of the protests were sort of happening. And I think they just really wanted to do something nice and beautify their space. You know, I think they're excited in this time to sort of reopen, and they're hopeful that they can reopen safely, just like everybody else is, you know. And I think they're just really wanting to, you know, have that connection back to the community that they love so much. And, you know, it's a shopping mall, you know, it really is. But I was actually surprised and pleasantly surprised that they were already sort of connected and embedded with the Larimer Consensus Group, a local community group just about a block or two away from here. And they did not want to do any kind of artwork here without connecting back to the Larimer Consensus Group and local artists and local community members. So I think the sincerity is there. I think they really just want to sort of really lay out the welcome mat and make people feel, you know, something, you know, hopefully inspiring when they visit the space.
Wow. So how did you get involved with all of this?
Well, I think it was probably by referrals with mutual colleagues. But like I said, just last year, we completed a mural right down the street, and I was in the same role there for Duolingo. Their headquarters is at South Beatty and Penn Avenue, which is literally, you know, I don't know, 10 or 15 blocks down the road in East Liberty. And I was called in, you know, basically the same way there. There was just sort of word of mouth. People knew that I, you know, used to run the Sprout Public Art program that did community murals in the area years ago. I used to be the city's public art manager as well after that. So people just knew that I was the guy that knew how to make this happen. So they just sort of called me up, and I started from there. And Duolingo was a very similar process. We they wanted to paint their entire facade of their building. And it's, probably 500 times the scale of this particular project here, because they did sort of a wraparound. I think it's something like 17,000 square feet of space. So totally different budget, but similar process where we did a call for artists. We received over 160 applications from people all over the world, had a local arts jury and Duolingo staff choose it. And in that case, we did an artist residency with the local Obama Academy. And the artist came into town. Ann Lewis was the artist out of Detroit. She came into town. This is right before COVID happened, so she was able to go to the school. And she had a week-long sort of mini residency with the art and language classes at Obama. So, and Anne is a former street artist, and you may have some images of that work in your portfolio there somewhere. But it's the sort of corner shot. There you go. Yeah. That's the overhead of Bakery Square. There you go. Mm-hmm. So Anne is the type of artist where she loves people, and she is very much on the ground as a former, street artist, very intelligent. She doesn't really work with kids a lot, and she definitely, doesn't often use kids to actually work on the mural itself. And you can't get kids 60 feet in the air in a lift either. So Anne was very clever in having a meaningful engagement with these kids in Obama by just having discussions with them. And she basically, since Duolingo is a tech company, a language company, and we're also talking about community because it's sort of a community mural, she had a discussion just with the kids, like, what is community to you? And how does language fit into this? How does language fit into your life? How does language fit into your relationships? And those kids were amazing. They talked about everything from gentrification to the different communities that they actually inhabit nowadays. There's an online community. There are bubbles of different communities, even within the online community nowadays. And it was a very interesting sort of discussion that Anne sort of delved into in the inspiration behind the mural. So the kids actually, she did this sort of clever trick with the kids, exercise rather, in choosing some colors. And then Anne came up with, you can maybe sort of read "We Rise" in those white lines in that image. And the other facade that may be obscured says "Together." So the words in the mural say "We rise together." Yeah, that's just sort of a close up there. That's the front facade there. So the kids were really blown away by this. It wasn't like they actually told Anne what to do in the artwork, but just that discussion ahead of time and that inspiration, I think, really meant a lot to her. So that was sort of what I did, leading up to this project. This was last year in 2019. And we basically had the interaction with the kids right before COVID. Then COVID hit, and Anne stayed away in quarantine until it was lifted. And then when she was able to come into Pittsburgh, into Pennsylvania, she quickly painted the mural in about 8 weeks with a local assistant, Sandy Kessler-Kaminsky. And then she went back to Detroit before we were sort of locked down again. So it was pretty amazing. I think something we would never forget. It's going to be similar in Bakery Square. So we're going to have to navigate COVID this time with that residency. We're going to have 2 schools instead of 1 school. So it's going to require, some ingenuity on the part of the artist. But with the sort of wide range of projects that Bakery Square is into, an artist might be able to actually fabricate off-site and install. So I think this, in lots of ways, Bakery Square is going to be a lot more flexible for artists, and hopefully be a lot of fun.
Wow. Sounds amazing. Sounds like a fun project to be a part of.
Oh yeah, I get paid for this.
That's amazing.
And it's great. It's great. Yeah. No, I enjoy it. My time, I am a fine artist myself, but I've done a lot of work with the city, working with architects and construction sites and stuff like that. So I have a sort of a wide range of strange skills that allow me to sort of enable artists. Sometimes artists, they're great established artists, but they've never, painted at this scale before, or they've never worked with a fabricator before. So sometimes I can really sort of put my skills and experience at use and sort of enabling artists to kind of reach that next level of a project. And I do that, I find a lot of joy in that when I can do that.
Wow. What do you suggest for artists who haven't painted at that scale before? Like, is this particular project something that they should like even try to get to be a part of, or is it like, oh, you've done this 50 times before?
Yeah, well, I think Bakery Square is going to be open to anything. However, artists have to be 18 above, an adult, to be eligible. We're going to judge artists on their experience level, so we're going to look at their portfolio. It's real easy to apply. You just go to bakerysquareart.com and there's a link to a submittable site. So if you're familiar with submittable, it's one of the easiest ways to apply to anything. It literally takes 5 minutes. It's free, doesn't cost anything, but you have to make an account. But once you sort of put your images in there, our jury will look at the resumes, the CVs for experience, the cover letters for experience, but the art is going to be number one. So if we love your art and you've never painted anything bigger than a 5x5 sheet of plywood before, I'm going to be there to help that artist scale it up. But if there are two equally impressive artists in terms of artwork, and one has more experience than the other, most likely the one with more experience would probably be selected. But, there are all kinds of factors. And like I said, community members are going to be on this jury too. So, I never can guess as to how the juries are really going to go. But yeah, I think in theory, any artist could apply for this project and be awarded.
Wow.
And back to your real question. I'm sorry, I got off tangent.
No, it's okay.
What I would say to artists in learning how to scale up. I mean, some artists don't want to scale up, and that's fine. Stay in the studio, or make prints, or make small work and work with a fabricator. We don't really love vinyl murals, but some people don't, some people do. But you can have companies blow up your art and actually either render them in paint. You can have other people sort of paint the thing for you, or fabricate the thing for you. But you can also have vinyl applied to the building. Part of Anne's mural there that you're looking at, the stripes that went over the windows are in vinyl. So, even artists like that can hand paint really well. I mean, she masked that off and sprayed that entire building. It's crazy. I would have never tried that. But she did it. She painted the white line. She painted the blended areas below it. But then when it came time to put something on the windows, we researched it and figured out that vinyl was probably the most long-lasting material we could use on the windows themselves. They could be replaced, easily by the vinyl company if something happened to them. So the stripes of the windows were done by a company. Artists can employ companies like that to make the entire art. So there are ways today. 3D printers. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that artists can, work with other professionals to create their art and then just have it installed. There are some benefits to that too. Those professional companies have insurance. So if you yourself don't have insurance, but you're going to work with a fabricator and an installation team, pay them to do it. And then you're the boss. You're just directing others to install the art. So I think this really opens up doors. A lot of professional artists I know work with fabricators in that way. And so I think that's one way to do it. Another way to do it, again, when COVID gets behind us, find ways to enter programs like the Bakery Square that will allow you to apply with, lesser experience. Other areas of the country have larger programs, like the Philadelphia Mural Arts program. I went through that program when I was in grad school. I made lifelong friends there. They were, incredible for giving me experience. And even when I got there, they had a sort of an apprentice program where, artists that have never painted anything, that large, worked under me and learned, the ropes that way. And that's the best way to do it, is to work with someone else. It's just a little, in Pittsburgh, I'm not sure if that's too prevalent nowadays. In the Sprout, pardon.
Well, here's my question. Would you consider getting them to have a budget for apprentices, like who are local apprentices, maybe to learn more? Could that be?
Yeah. So when we were at, when I was running the Sprout Public Art program from 2003 through 06 or 07, we hired assistants. So we did the same thing. We had a big call for artists, and we sort of juried in a giant pool of artists, and then we partnered the artists with we sort of placed artists with certain murals in certain communities. Then after the artists were selected, if there was some left over in that pool that had a little bit lesser experience or something like that, then we would ask them, would you like to be an assistant? And those that said, yeah, then we would pay them to work with artists. It wasn't the exact same thing as an apprenticeship, but it was sort of our way of doing it. It's hard to do that with insurance and liability unless if you have a full-blown program like Sprout Public Art or Philly Mural Arts, where the program can sort of hire them on as employees and either cover them under their own insurance, or the lead artist covers them under their own insurance or something like that. That way you can sort of do it. But if you don't have a big program like that, it's hard to do it. So in terms of Bakery Square, the way this would work, the lead artist would be absolutely free to hire any assistant they wanted under their budget and under their insurance. So it's a little bit of a tricky thing. So the Bakery Square Public Art Program, in other words, is not really set up for that, but it allows for it. So it
allows for it. So
it allows for it, but it's not really. Bakery Square is just sort of jumping out of the gate here with this pilot project, and they're very excited about it. They just want to keep it simple and nimble this first year. If it goes well, they may replicate it again, and they may not. It just depends. But it's not quite set up to sort of be that apprenticeship program. But as long as I'm here and managing it, if something like that comes up with an artist, we can handle it. And I know how we can manage it.
That's awesome. So they should just contact you if they're interested and they don't necessarily have that experience, but they want to get that experience. They could contact you.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I've already gotten a few people asking me about that. I've already gotten a couple of questions that people have emailed me about who saw the application and were like, hey, I don't really want to apply myself because I'm not that good or whatever, but I would like to, I'd like to either volunteer or be paid as an assistant if that comes up. So I'm just collecting their names. And the way I'll handle that this time is when we select the lead artist, and that artist needs an assistant, I will give him those recommendations or her those recommendations. Wow. and let them go with that. And again, we'll have to work out insurance and stuff like that, but I'm sure we can.
That's awesome. Yeah, I just interviewed some muralists the other day in San Diego, so it's very interesting to hear the different sides of it. So you've had a lot of different experience doing projects in the past of public work, right?
Yeah, so this is another interesting project here. This is Hartwood Acres. So this is the place. It's out in Shaler. It's a county park. And again, friends of friends sort of recommended me to help manage their sculpture conservation. So they had about 12 sculptures that had been there from the 60s through the 80s, and they really had not been maintained very well. So this is a Betty Gold sculpture called Monumental Holistic from the early 80s. And you can sort of see in that little image how degraded it is. My job was to help the county write sort of an RFQ, an RFP for qualified riggers. So that guy carrying that thing, his professional name is rigger. So what they do, they move large equipment, and they are professionals, and they're amazing. So we did an RFP through the county with their regular bidding process to select a rigging company to move the sculptures around in the park onto new bases, but also move some of the more degraded ones off-site to McKay Lodge Conservation Lab in Oberlin, Ohio, that I have a long-standing relationship with, and the City of Pittsburgh has a long-standing relationship with, that redo sculpture. So they're some almost, I guess, worldwide experts on renovating sculptures, restoring sculptures of all different types. So we had conservators on site too. We had a couple of local conservators that would paint some of the pieces that were not so bad off on site. And Teresa Duff of Lineage Historic Restoration here in Pittsburgh, she actually repainted this one. You might have another picture of this one finished that she did. So yeah, there it is. A little bit cut off. That's okay. There you go.
I'm back.
This one, we had local riggers move it onto its new site. Then Teresa came in and sort of built a tent over it, sandblasted it down, and then reprimed it and repainted it right on the spot. And that's the best. I mean, it's still not cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than trucking to Oberlin and trucking back, stuff like that. So it was important for me in that role, and important for the county too, to start sort of building those relationships with local contractors, but also relying on conservators to tell them, hey, this one's way too bad to do on site. We've got to get this back in the lab, and sort of have both those sort of options going. So at the end of, even through COVID and everything else, we got all but a couple of them done this year. And just in time. I think since everyone was sort of cooped up with COVID, we saw unprecedented numbers of people in the parks this past summer. I mean, it was to the point where we actually had to sort of move folks out of the way to kind of do our work sometimes. There were so many people in the park. So I think it was a really timely time, for lack of a better phrase, to kind of get this done. I think it was really important for folks.
Wow. So what advice do you have for artists who are trying to move into the realm of public art? Because it seems like that's your specialty, is connecting artists with these like places that have money to pay for it and spaces for it.
Well, there are calls for public art out in the world nowadays. I follow Americans for the Arts Public Art Network. They are a national arts advocacy organization. You can become a member, but you don't have to be a member. They have a national network of art administrators that are the ones who normally commission works like this, large-scale works. These are, pretty established artists. These are not, right out of high school artists making monumental steel sculptures. But they are that network will connect you to a lot of the administrators doing this kind of work. A lot of the administrators doing this kind of work are with city offices. So some of them are nonprofit organizations like the Sprout Public Art Program that used to be here. But many of them are city agencies. And so I just would say we have a great city agency here. It's my old office. Sarah Minert is now the public art manager for the City of Pittsburgh. So you can actually log on to the public art division of the City of Pittsburgh and receive notifications of any new projects that they're getting. And they're actually running a lot of new projects. And they're not monumental steel sculptures like this either. A lot of them are very small, like painted murals on playgrounds. Some of them are mosaic pieces. They're all different kinds of things. So I would say, definitely do that. the Office of Public Art, that's part of the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council. They also have an Artist Opportunities listserv that you can sign up for on the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council's website, and you can receive notifications of local and national public art opportunities. And
Wow.
it's
So what's that called again? In case
so
anybody wants to write that down.
yeah. I'm sorry, I'm talking fast too. So
No. It's just I think just like repeating the exact things, that way people can write it down.
right. So there's a couple of major funnels of news of artist opportunities here in the city of Pittsburgh. One is the City of Pittsburgh's own website. If you go to the city planning portion and you look up Public Art Division of the City of Pittsburgh, or just Google it, Public Art Division of City of Pittsburgh, they have a system that you can sign up for to get notifications on any new public art opportunities that they're advertising for. And so it's a bidding process, just like any other contracting, like I did with the county.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a really nice online, streamlined, I think, kind of system, a lot better than when I was there.
Wow.
So there's the City of Pittsburgh Public Art Division. Then there's also the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council. If you go to their website, and or the Office of Public Art, which is a part of the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council, they have an Artist Opportunities listserv. And so you can either jump on their website and just look at what current opportunities, local and national, that they have advertised, and or you can just sign up to get their emails. They send them out monthly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's
Yeah.
very cool.
Yeah.
So that's how you find out about this. How do you work with artists and matching them up with opportunities? Is there anything that does that, like, that you know about?
In my current role, I don't do that anymore.
You used to.
But I with the Sprout Fund, it was sort of cut and dried. You know, I had specific mural sites that were art that we already chose, and then I looked at an artist experience level and what the community was looking for in an artist. Like, would this community be into abstract art, or no? Are they definitely into historic art, or are they into, you know, hyperrealism? And we would sort of match them sort of thematically, I guess, that way. But I think more and more there are projects like mine, like Bakery Square, that you don't want to match anybody up. You want to cast the widest net and allow yourself to see what artists see in you. So if you're the commissioning agency and you have a site like we do in Bakery Square, what I advise them to do is, you know, don't say, hey, we're looking for muralists, or we're looking for street artists, or we're looking for, you know, photographic, you know, or impressionists. We're not looking. Just cast a wide net and say, hey, if you envision yourself here, we would like to hear from you, and see what the creative folks will come up with. You know, we're not paying ourselves to be the creative folks here. We're wanting to hire creative folks. So we don't want to limit our choices. We don't want to, and I think it's better that way. I think a lot of projects are sort of going this way, this temporary project, and sort of this wide open kind of calling all artists kind of thing. And I should mention that about the Bakery Square project too. It is temporary. It's only meant, the artwork is only meant to last 6 to 12 months, and then it's coming down, and the artist will be responsible, but able to take it down and keep it. So this is kind of a new thing for this area, although it's been done before. We did a similar project in Market Square years ago too. And I think the idea is, if it goes well this year, we might replicate it again. And if it begins to sort of take on this revolving, series of temporary public artworks, I think it keeps the area fresh, and it gives a lot more opportunities to a lot more artists. Yeah,
because I really love like the Mural Festival in Montreal and things like that, where there's always a fresh. I'm a long time Pittsburgh resident myself. I'm like, I always want like fresh art. Like I'd love a mural festival here.
Yeah.
You know, see who the artists are now, you know?
Well, it does a couple of things too. Like a lot of cities are doing this, and I started doing this when I worked for the city because one of the hardest things to do is to pay for maintenance. So if you don't have to pay for maintenance, I mean, it's a really a big thing. And you can be a lot more bold with temporary art. You know, when we're making a new bronze sculpture of some politician and putting them in downtown, like there's a lot of scrutiny that goes on. You know, a lot of people have to wring their hands and talk about this and worry about it and fret. But when it's temporary, you don't really have to, you know, for just a lot of different reasons, I think, you know, temporary art programs are really becoming popular, and I'm all for it. And, you know, artists knowing this going into this project, I think it'll help manage expectations, but I hope it'll help them in the planning too, you know, like maybe they can have some ideas on, you know, the design of the thing as to how it can live on afterward. You know, if it's a digital piece or a projection, that's easy, I guess. But, you know, if you're of a traditional painter, you know, how might you engineer the thing to be removable, and where might you go with it afterward? And, you know, could the residency sort of inform that thinking too? So I think it's really kind of, I think it's kind of a cool premise.
I think that's very interesting of what you said, like the residency informing the art itself.
Yeah.
How do you see that going? Like, what would your dream of that residency information flow happening?
Well, we have gotten both in Bakery Square, in its case, we've gotten both the schools secured. They are absolutely enthusiastic and they're ready to go. And one of the schools, Lincoln Elementary, they've actually got their STEAM teachers. So it's like art and math and engineering and all that kind of stuff. And they're gearing up and excited and thinking sort of along those lines. But I'm trying to also kind of keep everybody open-minded because we don't know who the artist is yet. And, you know, like I just got through telling you, like it could be a painter or it could be a digital artist. Like we just have no idea. So at the risk of saying too much or, you know, not knowing, generally speaking, what you want is the artist to have some meaningful face-to-face time with the students for a couple of reasons. But the main reason is to connect to the community. And, you know, I think the Larimer Consensus Group was very wise, and they actually suggested that we work with the elementary schools because they're like, well, you know, they've actually had a few art residencies there already. Like John Pena is a local artist who's actually has an ongoing public art project with that community, but he's working with the seniors. And then the Larimer Consensus Group, the people who show up to their meetings are adults. And so they were like, why don't you work with the kids? Nobody ever works with the kids. So, you know, it's a connection to the community, but it's a connection to the kids. And I think that's a real, I hope it's not daunting. We will make it not daunting for the artists. But I think it's a unique opportunity to get a completely different perspective on who the community is. And hopefully, you know, it's not that like we're trying to depict the community in this mural, but hopefully it's going to be inspirational to the artist. Just like Anne got those words, "We rise together," out of talking to those Obama students. I'm hoping that same kind of magic, as minimal as the proof of that discussion only exists in those words and in those colors in that Duolingo mural. So that's not a whole lot of evidence of meaningful interaction. But if we can at least sort of get that inspiration of the artist and that meaningful interaction with the professional artist, with those kids, I think we've done our jobs. And I think that will be an incredible experience. You know, a lot of adults haven't met artists. You know, they may not even have thought about it. But just meeting an artist, especially younger kids, knowing that that's a profession, knowing it's a real thing, and knowing that, you know, after the fact, when they drive by or walk by that mural or whatever it is, that piece of public art, knowing they had a hand in that in some way, it really makes a long-lasting connection, real powerful connection that it just really kind of opens minds up all the way around. So, if we can just capture a little bit of that, I think we will have been successful.
Wow. So what inspires you in like forming these relationships and bridging these gaps between people? Because it seems like you're bridging gaps between different artists and communities and public spaces. What inspires you? Like what got you?
Well, I think that, especially right now, I'll just be completely blunt. I mean, a $20,000 job for an artist is much needed right now. It really can change the life of an artist. I mean, it can literally, take them from, entry-level artist up to mid-career artist just to have that kind of budget. A lot of artists haven't had that kind of budget to play with, or someone like me at their disposal to help them connect to fabricators or something like that. So it can be a huge sort of professional development opportunity for an artist. And like I started to say, communities sometimes have never met an artist, never talked to an artist, never been a part of anything like this. So for them, it's just magic. It's just like seeing a space shuttle being built. Like they've just never had this opportunity before. They might have seen Bob Ross on TV or something like that, but they've never seen the act of art being made sort of unfold in front of their eyes. So in terms of like if it was a painted mural, one of the things pre-COVID that I used to talk about and used to experience is that same thing. Artists would be out in the world, physically out there on that building, painting day after day after day. And passers-by would go, by twice, maybe a day on, towards work and then back home from work. And I've heard so many people just tell me how it just blew them away that someone did that with their hands, painted that large scale, so like that. And it really builds, a sense of respect that, some people may have just not ever had. That it's not, I called it magic a while ago, but I think some people also just think artists just sort of wave their magic wand and it appears. But for them to actually see the artist out there working every day is meaningful to them. It's physical labor, it's expertise, it's craftsmanship. And this project, I hope we can have some of that. With COVID and everything else, I'm not sure what we're going to do. We're probably going to be doing a lot of fabrication off-site, and then install once it's fabricated. Even if it's a painted mural, it's probably going to be done that way. But I'm hoping with the magic of Zoom and technology, and I'm going to suggest this to the artists, that we share a lot of that process with the kids in the residency as much as possible, so that can sort of be a meaningful aspect of it. So. No, I'm giving you a sermon here, but
no.
Elements...
This is like, say it from your heart. What you want. Speak it to the world. This is your chance.
All right. Well, when all of those different aspects come together, you're giving an artist a job. You're putting money in their pocket. You're contributing to the local artist ecosphere. So when you make jobs for artists, you have artists living in your city. That's magic, right? When there are no artist jobs in your city, they move. So building that sort of community is important. There have to be artist jobs here, and not just the jobs artists go to after they finish working in the studio, but jobs making art. The more we can do that in any community, the more artists we're going to have, the more diverse and interesting and culturally responsive our community is going to be. So that's important. But then connecting that sort of that professional artist into the community, it just gives them that greater experience, and to know that they sort of had a hand in the thing that is sort of put out there in the world.
Wow. Amazing. You've got some real heart in this, building this. What would be your dream of, like, if you could say, like, what could happen in the world around you? If you could say anything, like, you got huge budgets, like bigger than you could dream of, and you could do anything you wanted, and you could get that consistently, yeah. It's like
I know what you're
times
saying.
a day. Anyhow, so you can get that all the time. You can keep getting it. And what would you want? What would you dream about?
Well, I'm afraid to say it out loud because
No, say it out loud. This
some of
is your
those
time. This is your time.
well, yeah, but some of those times you ask for it and then it actually appears, and it's like a dog chasing a car. He finally catches it and doesn't know what to do with it.
Well, say it, and you can also ask for all the help you want.
Oh yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
Well,
Okay.
so just to be serious, we've talked about it for a long time in Pittsburgh, and we just haven't done it. I haven't done it. No
Not
one else
yet.
really. No, not yet. But I think Pittsburghers for a long time have wanted to have sort of I don't want to call it a program, but just like an art core of engineers, almost like the WPA in the 30s, if you remember that.
Oh,
And yeah,
all the bridges around here in the parks were built.
yes,
like
absolutely. Yeah. So like a new deal for artists, basically, where
Yes.
you have, unlimited, well, nobody has unlimited budget, but you have an entire program where you can sort of mitigate the issues of insurance and apprentices and you could have a steady flow of emerging artists out of high school that work with professional artists to do whatever kind of public art there is, sculpture, digital, painting, whatever. But then you also employ these artists to do some restoration work and integrate these artists into new buildings. So one of the things that I was not successful in bolstering, but I know Sarah Minert at the City of Pittsburgh is working well on this now, is really enforcing the city's 1% for art program. So we have one here, and they're starting to do more projects with it now, but it could be better, and most cities could be better. But the idea is every time the city builds a new city building, 1% of that city's budget, 1% of that building's budget is supposed to go towards art for that building. So a lot of cities have this program. So similar to that, when we're building new buildings in the city of Pittsburgh, whether they be private or public, there could be this cadre of artists that are integrated into the designs of the building. And when it works well, like what we're doing in Bakery Square now, I'm glad they thought to integrate art onto this building as they're building it, because I've been able to tell them, to work with their architects and get some substrates over those windows that will be sacrificial, so artists can attach to it. So
I think our internet. Give us a minute here. Yeah.
In that way, or you can go through a selection process and have artists on the design committee as a partner to the architect. So from the ground up, the architect is already brainstorming with the artists and the client as they're building the building, as they're envisioning the literal footprint of the building, so that art can sort of be integrated throughout the building and not just, placed on one facade or multiple artists. So if I had a big dream, I think some sort of mechanism where artists could be connected in that way across the city in multiple different ways like that, I think would be powerful. And I think a lot of people have talked about that over time and have done it in sort of fits and stops at different times.
So you'd want to see that bigger than ever, the 3%, 5%.
Well, but I'm not sure. So I have all kinds of models, and we could talk throughout the evening.
Oh yeah. Well, give the time we're talking about you and your dreams. So you put it out there into the world, and you never know, right?
There are great models that I've researched back in my time with the city of private percent for arts and public percent for arts. The city of Philadelphia has a private percent for art, which is incredible. And it's a way that like cities can incentivize private developers through tax credits and stuff like that. We even talked about working on historic tax credits and integrating art at one point. And I mean, that sounds like it wouldn't work, but it might. But so there are models of actually, cities sort of doing it through legislation where there's some incentivization going on with private developers and public developers. But there also is this other model, sort of like the Philadelphia Mural Arts Program or Spark in LA, where you sort of have this cadre of artists, and it's an army of artists that you just continually, like you asked me earlier, how would you hook, those artists, how would you match those artists up with opportunities? I could see that sort of broadened to where we could sort of, that program or project could actually sort of handle all of these things.
Wow. So it sounds like you've got a dream today. It's a specific day to have a dream. Sounds like you've got
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a special Monday today. So
yeah, it is. Yeah.
So it sounds like you've got a dream. That's the day.
Well, yeah, like I said, a lot of these, everything I just said to you isn't new. A lot of people in my field know of these models, and we've done, a few things like this in Pittsburgh. But that when you mentioned consistency earlier, I thought that was an appropriate term. I don't think it's really been applied consistently here, and I think that's what you really need to build that community. The Philly Mural Arts has been, oh my God, they're probably 30, 40 years going now. I don't even know, but a lot of years. And, there are people that's their sole profession. They're a muralist in the Philly Mural Arts Program, and they've been doing that for, their whole adult life. And that's important. When you build it, artists will come and they'll stay and they'll live here.
Wow. So that's your dream. It sounds like that's part of your dream, is artists coming to stay and living here and really building that, constructing that for them, constructing that way. Do you have any other aspects of that you'd like to put out into the world, or ideas for how that could be?
Well, I don't know. If any of my friends are watching, they've lived a lot of this with me. A lot of my friends here in Pittsburgh and colleagues too. Some of them have worked for Philly Mural Arts and worked with me at Sprout Fund here and doing murals. We did 35 different murals under my watch here, and I think they probably did another 25 or 30 or more after I left the Sprout Fund. And that was a really good program. That it was strictly murals, and I think that a program like that today, being diversified into other types of public art, I think would be needed and appropriate. But one of the things that you have to think about when you're building anything like that, typically they're nonprofit programs. Typically they're in non-government programs, and they're nonprofit. You have to think about your audience, and you have to think about a need that you're serving. And I think that's the thing that sometimes allows for the inconsistency of programs. Sometimes the need changes, the community changes, the political will changes, and all those kinds of things. The local economy changes. So, it's amazing for programs to outlast those changes and be nimble through those changes. But I think anything like that today that's created needs to be nimble and able to adapt to its community. And I can't tell you how to do that. I just know that it should do that. But that's the tough part.
Wow. What do you see that you would need in order for that to happen? Like, what would someone comes up to you that has something and it's like, here you go. What are those things? Like, I can change legislation. I can get this corporation to give you money. I have 50 people who are willing to work. Like, what do you need in order to make that happen?
Well, I mean, money always works, but that works. But you need a structure, and I think if to do something like this right. And again, my time with the Sprout Fund sort of taught me how to. It was sort of my first experience in being a staff member of a nonprofit, a 501c3 that had a board. So you have an advisor. You need to really if you're going to do anything like that, you sort of need to set it up right, where you have an advisory board, you have a 501c3 designation, or you're a subsidiary of an existing one or something like that. And you have to, there's probably some strategic planning that you need to do, but you would need to, I think, sort of prove the need that you're fulfilling. You would need to do some work in having discussions with the community, live discussions, surveys, that sort of thing, and sort of, have proof of concept, have proof of need and proof of concept, business model sort of thing, pro forma kind of thing, before taking off. And again, I think that could be done. One of the things I'm doing right now, and I think one of the things that excites me about working with Bakery Square and Duolingo is these are the guys that, I wanted to work with. I was working downtown when they were building their new facilities. And I wish so much that I could give them some big carrot, out of city planning, like, hey, I'll give you a big tax credit if you'll make art part of your, but I couldn't do that. It didn't work. I mean, I didn't have the power to do that. It takes a lot of, work, but, and legislation. But now that they're well established now years later, and I'm so happy to be back working with them and at their request and helping them sort of do, frankly, what I had hoped they had done on the front end. But I'm very pleased to be working with these private developers, quote unquote, now, because to me that's sometimes the most liberating way to make art. Is you're not government. You don't have to deal with the advisory board. They can basically do whatever they want. They're private all the way around, but it makes me feel good about my work and their work when they want to do things the right way. But just for me right now, I'm happy right now where I'm at. Working with them in this way, because it's fulfilling one of those bucket list items that I had from way back and working with private developers in public art. But if money drops out of the sky and board members and all that kind of stuff, we might do plan B as well. Who knows?
That sounds amazing. I mean, who knows? Who knows where this conversation goes? Yeah. So might as well put the dream out there into the world. Today's the day for dreams.
Yeah, right.
Today's Absolutely. The day for dreams.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It can't happen if we don't dream it and say it, right?
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I've done a lot of talking to a lot of people in Pittsburgh over the years. When I was at the city and even before then, we started developing a public art plan for the city when I worked for city planning. And we did a lot of talking with community members and artists at that time. So, and time has passed since then, but a lot of the same wants and needs, they don't ever go away. And it can be done. I think it can be done really well. I just think the consistency is the problem. And I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I really like the way I talked to some of the founders of the Mural festival in Montreal a couple years back, and it was very interesting how they did it, where they had the first year they had like 1 or 3 walls, and then they grew that to maybe 10 walls, and then 20 and 30, and they just have it on one street, and they shut down Saint Laurent, and everyone walks every night. There's parties and people are walking by every day, every night, really seeing like 100 murals being set up in one strip. And it becomes everything shut down for this mural festival. And it really puts like art on the forefront, and every year just new and fresh, and like it's ours and it's part of it. And it's not just one, there's a lot, and it's a part of it. And I just wonder if something like that could ever be done in Pittsburgh. Is there inspiration on a smaller, maybe on a smaller level, but to just even start that like every, yearly, and bringing, because the consistency could be yearly or bi-yearly or something, right?
Yeah, well, I think what I was saying earlier, the consistency is the problem, and it's something that needs to be perfected, and for lack of a better word, on any program like this and going forward. But the thing I meant earlier about responding to your community and their needs and wants. That's the hard part in doing what you're talking about, because there are certain cities like Philadelphia that they've been doing murals for so long now that it's just a part of the fabric of the city. You cannot go to Philadelphia and throw a rock without hitting a mural, and it's part of their identity now. And they did that same thing. They went block by block, just like you're talking about. They made connections to the community members. Communities wanted the murals. The murals were given to communities for free of charge, and that's a big plus. Artists began flocking there because there was money. There was a way to make money being an artist, and so they went there. I went there for grad school. They have good grad schools too. That also brings artists into a community, as that kind of thing. But one of the things that Philadelphia has had to do lots of times too is paint over old murals. After a while, they need to be retouched. They either get vandalized or just sun and weather. They have to be retouched. Then you have to ask yourself, well, are we going to repaint the same thing back, or are we going to do something new? But I had 2 paintings in Philly that I painted over, and they called me. I mean, it'd been 8 years or 10 years. It'd been a long time. They called me up and were very nice, and they were like, hey, we think we really need to paint over your murals. Are you okay with that? And I was like, well, sure, but why? And they explained that the communities have completely changed since I was there. It was largely African American when I was there, that little section of the city, but it had changed, I think, to largely Latino after a time, and the mural just didn't really fit, and it needed to be repaired anyway. So, that's just a small example. But then there's also, when we were doing the Sprout Fund here years ago, like I said, we were I don't want to call it a blitz, but we were painting them en masse, sort of like you're suggesting. We didn't pick one corridor and just start, going down the corridor. We were all over the city. But after about 5 years of my working on that, I started getting community members in certain areas tell me they didn't want murals anymore. They had enough. And they didn't want every house being painted with a mural, and they didn't want, and that wasn't widespread, but it was out there, and it was stated by a lot of sincere, well-meaning, good people. And it just dawned on me that, at that point in time, that you have to, that's what I sort of mean about, you have to be nimble and adaptive and serve a community. You can't be a crusader coming into a colonizer, for lack of a better word, coming into a neighborhood and putting your flag down. And you really sort of have to be invited in, and you have to make sure that, what you're doing makes sense in that context. And just sort of going into any space or any city and just sort of blitzing it like that, it can't work in all areas. And Pittsburgh is weird like that. Some cities are just happy to have whatever, and they're just into it. Lots of West Coast cities are just really into community murals and street art and stuff like that. Well, Pittsburgh is not that way. It has specific taste in specific areas of the city. And that's sort of what I mean about, if we ever sort of do that over again, or my advice to anyone wanting to do it, you have to be adaptive. I think a program like that today, I wouldn't just paint murals. I would have multiple forms of art, for one thing.
For
and I would,
sculpture, digital art, projections.
Yeah, and start, I'm a painter myself, and so many of us, we came out of art school thinking that we were the heroic, Jackson Pollock type, art for art's sake, and there's all kinds of fun room for that. But when you're making public art, you have a greater responsibility, and because you're gonna go in there and you're gonna do your thing and you're gonna leave. Everybody else is stuck with it; they live with it, right? So you have a greater responsibility where you need to connect to that community, and you don't have to, have them design it for you, and you don't have to sort of water down what you're about, but you have to spend some face time with them, and you have to sort of get inspired by that place and make it site specific. I think that's really sort of the mode for public artists nowadays, is to really think about making places and making their art site specific and contextual to the community. And nowadays people are using public art to talk about who the community is. That we used to have this joke: we'd show up to a community meeting, and somebody would ask, "Well, who is the community anyway?" And I think that's the question. I think a lot of artists are asking with public art nowadays, who is the community?
My big question is, who does the community want to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because I think there's something to, like, when the painting and the dreams are just what is, then, like, are we really, how do we ask the questions of, what do we dream about? What do we want? Yeah. What's the heart of it? What's the future? I just talked to wonderful organization at Art House New York City, and she's coming back to Pittsburgh. So it's just like changing the 2,000 on a belt to 3,000. Like, what's the future? And for you, I'm curious, if you could design the future of, like, what the public art world is in the world, or in Pittsburgh particularly, because you seem very ingrained in wanting to change that. If you could dream it up, besides the structure, besides this, you're walking down the street somewhere, what do you see? How do you feel? What is that for you?
I think there's a groundswell here that would support this, and I would like to see a lot of art that deals with the environment. We have a great piece with Stacy Levy. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Stacy Levy is a regional artist. I believe she still teaches out at Penn State. But she's an environmental artist, and she has sort of a rain garden runnel system that was integrated into the new Frick Environmental Center when we built that with the city, and it's out in the open. You can see it any day. It's better to go when it's raining.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome. And, like, the
stones.
Just walking around there the other day.
Yeah. So Stacy's great, and she's really well known, but I don't know. I would like to see that, and I think there is a lot of interest in that mode of art making in this city and in most cities. And so, if you just ask me what I envision, the future of art in Pittsburgh, perhaps walking down the street, I would see a lot of green projects. I would see a lot of earthworks, rooftop gardens, artist, architect, landscape architect collaborations. I think I've seen a few of those in my time. And they're exciting to me. I think that, again, artists don't need to sort of handcraft everything that they make anymore. And I think these kinds of professional collaboration with allied fields can make some really incredible pieces. So some examples are like some of the work that city planning did downtown on Penn Avenue, where I'm forgetting the artist's name, but they had some artists and some architects win some sort of mini competitions to design, like, some parking spaces where they would take a lane of traffic and do, like, a little, like, pop-up cafe, or like a little. And there are projects like that have been done all around the world, in America too, in the last few years. And I think that was just starting to sort of get hot before COVID hit. So I don't think. I mean, this idea I'm telling you is not new, and I think it's very feasible, and I'm thinking we will see more of that as soon as we can get out and make art again.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of curious. Like, that's very interesting that, where you're at now and what we're seeing, that the art, might be the afterthought, but is a central part of, these buildings. And that's kind of like where we're at, what our built environment is. But it seems like you have some heart in the idea that the art is a part of that collaboration in the built environment.
Yeah. I mean, we can, we were hot and heavy on green walls for a time, and that was a thing.
There's one downtown for a long time.
Yeah. But they're insanely expensive to maintain. So it's like. But, it's things like that they sort of bubble up. It's the consistency thing again, right? So things like that sort of bubble up, and one or two, large examples gets done in a city, and then someone else experiences the hardship of maintenance or whatever. And then it's like, so nobody does them anymore. So, some things like that can sort of derail those ideas because there isn't like a program to kind of pick up the pieces and keep it moving,
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I mean, I know some of the costs on that one downtown. It was horrendous. But it was big too. I mean, what do you expect? But some things are not, cost effective, and some things may look like they're environmentally friendly, but at the end of the day, it actually costs more to water the thing than it does. It's like, but nonetheless, I think, if you had a program, if you had sort of a caretaker, if you will, of projects like that around town, I think they could live on longer and more would pop up. But if you just ask me, I think that's sort of the realm that I see art sort of going into, and it's one that I would really welcome. I think it'd be really incredible.
Wow. So what advice would you have for artists looking to collaborate with like architects? Because that seems like the next realm, like these environmental projects how would you, if, I mean, you're an artist yourself, also, and maybe we can take a little trip to your studio in a second for a couple of minutes. But first, like, what advice? I know Lori, she does a lot of work she's in Italy and does a lot of work with artists around the world. Like, what advice would you have for artists who would like to do these sorts of collaborations? What should they do?
Well, it's tough when there's no money and there's no site.
If there were,
well, no, I'm being silly.
I know.
But when a competition like Bakery Square comes up, you can take advantage of that to create your first collaboration, because that's some language that we have on that program is similar to language I've used in many programs that I've run and many programs I've seen around the country, where more and more professional, large and small, I mean, it's typically larger size budgets because you can't partner when there's no budget, but no room on the budget. But many projects today allow for artists and or collaborative teams to apply for, such and so opportunity. So that's when you reach out, and sometimes, you find architects that, from friends, or, if you're a visual artist and you want to sort of look into this, just Google Pittsburgh architectural firms and look at their portfolios and just find somebody you like, or someone that has already worked with artists that's in their portfolio, because many of them have, and reach out to them. Say, hey, do you want to collaborate on this project? And I'm not going to mention any names.
Right.
I have literally been, I've been called up almost, an hour before deadline before, and people ask me to collaborate on different bids or different RFQs like this, and people do it. And it's I'm not going to say it's easy, but that's the way in, I think, is you just knock on doors. And when you have a project like Bakery Square or like Duolingo or any of these projects where there's an open call for applicants and there's that language that, collaborative teams are eligible, do it that way. Absolutely.
Excellent. Why don't we take a little trip to your studio for a couple of minutes?
Okay. All right.
Take a little.
I'm just going to carry you.
Yeah, curious.
I'll carry you.
Perfect. We're here. We're along on the ride.
What's that now?
We're along on the ride.
Yeah. You'll probably get drunk with this shaky camera, but I'm trying my best.
No, don't worry. I'm still, so I'm here. Still enough.
Yeah.
I've got I'm here in my studio. So.
Oh, good. Well, I've got 4 kids, and they're out of remote school today, so they're all at home, and they're being good for the nonce. But okay, so here we are. I'm gonna try to keep my headphone up here so I can hear you. These may glare a little bit.
Oh, perfect. And you can also turn the camera around here. This is the part.
Oh, can I?
Yeah, there's a little swirl button.
I got it. Yeah. Oh, that's
cool.
better.
There we go.
Yeah. So I went to grad school in Philly, the Pennsylvania
Mm-hmm.
Academy, and I had undergrad painting BFA experience too. And I've always had sort of two um, avenues. I'm a figurative painter. I like pop art and old master painting, and I also like abstract expressionism. So
Hmm.
right now I'm doing abstract expressionist paintings, sort of derived from nature. Um,
Wow.
Sometimes gets a little impressionistic.
Wow, that's very cool. What sort of mediums are you using here?
It's oil and cold wax.
Hmm.
So I don't know if you
Interesting.
can see that.
Yeah, take us in.
The oil can be just freely mixed with a substance called cold wax, and I just buy Dorland's now, but I used to make it with beeswax.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just if you can imagine in caustic, like Jasper Johns and some of those guys would use a hot plate and keep the wax hot. Cold wax has solvent in it, so that you don't need to keep it hot.
Mm.
So
Interesting.
you mix it in like any kind of medium, and it makes a translucency if you want it to, or if you put more paint, you know, relatively with it, it's opaque but looks like cake icing. So
Wow.
you can build up a texture, you can scratch through it, and
Yeah,
basically what
take us
I
in. Take us in. Take us some wide views, some close views. Show us
yeah
whatever you want, you know?
yeah well, these are the ones I've got on the this is my wall right now of I usually paint on 4 or 5 of them at a time,
Oh,
and
really?
these are the smaller ones.
Uh-huh.
Um,
You have some more around?
yeah, let me try to get them here.
Yeah, this is a very loose
Here's some of
setting, so
my
feel free to.
figurative work. They're kind of shoved over here in the corner, but I used to do these cutouts. Here's a self-portrait.
Ah,
Um, I've got other stuff here. It's kind of wacky.
cool.
So that's the pop art stuff I used to do,
Uh-huh.
and the cutouts, and
Uh-huh.
I have abandoned them for now.
Well, sometimes you've got to change it around, and I see a lot of work underneath and around.
Oh yeah, I have a couple pieces at Christine Fritchard's gallery in Butler on
Oh
Butler
yeah.
Street in Lawrenceville right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I probably have 25 or 30 of these here in the
Mm-hmm.
basement
Mm-hmm.
now, and I may take them, some of them back to her.
Right.
So
Oh, very cool.
yeah. Sorry, I wasn't really prepared for this part.
No, it's okay. Everyone's open up their art on the camera. I love it. That's like, take us around the studio. Tell us what's going on. That's my that's my thing.
Yeah,
That's
well, cool. I appreciate
yeah.
that. And this is fun for me. Nobody's really seen these yet, so
Oh wow. Well,
I'm.
this
It's
is the first look. You'll have to share it, let people know, because
yeah.
so do you want to tell us a little bit more about like what inspires you here?
Yeah, like I said, I have a couple of bodies of work here that I really decided to go back into the abstract work basically after COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
I was stuck at home, and I'm like, well, this would be a great time to in between consultant gigs to get back to my
Mm-hmm.
painting, and I literally just wanted to look at beautiful things for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I just really wanted to get, out of politics, out of anything
Mm-hmm.
literal,
Mm-hmm.
and just get back to, this idea that, the picture is worth 1,000 words, and the picture can do more than words can ever do. So I tend to paint from memory,
Mm-hmm.
either figurative or non-representational work like this. And so a lot of the work comes from memory,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not like I sit here and try to remember something I saw on the way home last night and then come home and replicate it. Lots of times it's just vignettes within the painting are from
Mm-hmm.
memory, or the genesis of the painting was from memory. And then the
Right.
rest is improvisation,
Cool.
or improvisation sparks a memory or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
if you look down here,
Mm-hmm.
um, this is an example of one of my that is not a painting, that's an underpainting. So that's a primed board. With the
Yeah.
wax I typically paint on hard board, because it can crack if it's on canvas. But some of these are on canvas. When I was in undergrad, and this is why I was talking earlier about that apprenticeship kind of idea. When I was in undergrad, because I had a BFA, we had to have an internship or apprenticeship, and I apprenticed with two artists, Gene Hatfield and Sammy Peters, and back in Arkansas. Sammy Peters was a painter, abstract expressionist painter, kind of like Philip Guston, but kind of like what you're seeing here of mine. And he made his own paint. He made an acrylic underpainting. He made the wax. He made the whole thing. He used really terrible chemicals to like melt your tennis shoes kind of chemicals. So what he had me do, I made his own acrylics for him. So he gave me the binder and the pigment and all that kind of stuff. Then I coated he used paper. So I coated his paper like that with just sort of not really abstract paintings, but just you're sealing it off is basically what you're doing, and putting some color down. Then I would hand him the finished piece, and then he would start doing this stuff on top of it. And so it sort of gave me that mode of art making that could be immediate, where I could just jump right in and not have any, prefixed idea. Right. You can just start improvisation and sort of let it suggest things to you and just sort of go from there. But I also just, like I said, I do it both ways. I start with an idea or an image from memory, and then just, take off from there. So this whole mode of making is very therapeutic. I use a palette knife and the oil and the wax paint, and that's where that is new for me. I haven't done that before. I usually painting with brushes. So a lot of these marks, sort of the scratching in, I almost call some of these, I think in my artist statement I mentioned like archaeological digs, where the layers of paint, I'm literally scratching back through these thin layers and revealing, the underpinnings, the whole thing. So, it's just been good therapy, honestly, throughout COVID. But I really like, where the work is going now, and may kind of stick with this for a while.
Wow. How would you ever blow something like this up to a mural size?
I was thinking about that, and so that's another vision of mine. We're talking about vision.
Let's talk about it.
I've always wanted to see just a purely abstract. I mean, some of these are almost impressionistic, and I could see them as being sort of landscape murals, but some of these others are just very, very abstract. And I've always wanted to see a mural like that, where it was straight up, just, it would take some doing. I could absolutely do it, but it would take some doing because some of the things that make good easel paintings do not make good murals. For instance, that texture, that texture is great. I love it. It's luscious, but out in the world, it catches dirt. So especially in Pittsburgh, the soot and the automobile soot and the rain and the run, it would not be good. So you would have to figure out ways to replicate that that texture, but really clear coat the heck out of the thing so that dirt won't sort of sit in those grooves. And it would be a different, you could still get the matte finish. I don't know if you can see the finish on these, but the wax gives it a sort of a matte finish. And that's something else I really like. You can replicate that in an exterior mural with a clear coat. So you could have the same protection of a glossy clear coat, but it would be matte finished. But you would still have to deal with that texture. The texture on this painting, that would probably not be too bad. Out on a wall, that would be not dissimilar to like a low stucco, So essentially that would be the hang up. The only hang up beyond that would be finding a property owner that would allow that on their wall.
Well, I think every wall, I'd like a whole block like that, 10 blocks, just like that. That would be cool.
I would too. And it's one of those things where it's like, we were talking about, listening to the community, and um, involving the community in the work. This would be one of those things where, this might be a hard approach for a community meeting, right? Like, I'm not sure there'd be much to say about this kind of artwork. They would either love it or hate it. And I think you would just peddle it around until you found someone who loved it and then just paint it on the wall, right? So there might not be a whole lot of traditional sort of community communication or dialogue, rather, around this kind of art making. But I think this kind of art, for art's sake, in a community would be absolutely gorgeous. And I do want to sort of produce these, either mine or someone else's, in a community someday. I think it would be great.
You can produce your own with other people, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you found a group of abstract impressionist sort of artists and you could produce it with them, that'd be pretty cool. Like a whole block like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, like you can, well, there are lots of ways to produce public art. It always takes money. That's the first hurdle. But you can approach people, right? Like so if you're a known program or you're a known entity, and a new restaurant coming to town knows who to call, they'll call you. Or like the GPAC artist registry that exists on their website, some property owners will know to look on there and find an artist they like and contact them. But you could go out, if you had a budget, or if you had some sort of expertise, you could sort of peddle this art, I think, to the right client. But it would take a little doing. Again, maintenance and all that kind of stuff is always the detractor on public art. But I have answers for all those things. Those are just the hurdles. It
right.
Could be done. Yeah.
I mean, so how would you, if you're doing this here, how would you start to practice this on a larger scale, like so that you could maybe get that next step for the budgets or all of that other stuff? How would you take those next steps? You doing this here, what are the steps that you would need to do in order to fulfill that dream? Like, what are, from here to like bridge those gaps between this kind of work and seeing this at such a massive scale that it would just blow people away?
Well, there's always the access point of these programs, like Bakery Square, and that type of program could absolutely support some art like this. But I think it might be a hard sell. I think in a program like that, you just never know what the jury is going to choose, and they may love something like this, as their personal taste, but they might not see how this type of art could connect to the community. Something like that might not avail you for every public art opportunity that's sort of a call for artists. And I would say that this type of art probably is a little bit harder through that avenue. So the other way to do it is just to approach property owners. Find a wall you like, go knock on their door. Do it in a safe and distance way during COVID, right. But knock on their door and say, hey, this is my artwork, and do you like it? And I have experience, and here's my resume, and here's what it would cost. And they're going to smile and shake your hand and not call you. So then you might go to a local community development corporation and introduce yourself there, email them. And those are, many places in Pittsburgh have a local CDC, we call them, a nonprofit organization, that is their sole work is to work with local property owners and residents and try to make the neighborhoods better. So sometimes they have small grants, like Main Street America grants, that they can put towards beautification projects that sometimes can be murals. So you can knock on their door and just sort of introduce yourself and see if you can find a fit that way. So there's multiple ways to do it. It's just, again, if there are more likely ways to do it than others. And this is just one of those things. I think this type of art making just requires a little bit of ingenuity, and just finding the right fit.
Right. Yeah. Cause I'm just intrigued by it, and I'd love to see a giant wall with what you're doing here on it.
Yeah.
That would be beautiful. I think, that's what Pittsburgh needs.
Well, and a lot of street art is sort of coming around now too. Like I'll not mention any names, but I've got some friends and colleagues that are doing, some really cool stuff right now. Again, in the East End, there's some street art that, there was a time in Pittsburgh where, they wanted to lock up all the street artists. And, now I think it's really kind of coming around full circle, and I love to see it. I think there's believe it or not, I see a lot of similarities in my work to some street artists' work. The improvisation and the spontaneity. I think I agree with you. I would love to see this work, but I think the street artists might have sort of opened the door a little bit for the rest of us.
Interesting. When your work is so improvisational, how would you apply that to such a large space?
Well, the way I work, and I think this is the only way to work, once in a while you'll get a property owner that will give you a wall and just say, just make something pretty, and you can do it. But 9 times out of 10, that is not, and that's never the way I've worked. I've always given them a design that they approve, and we sign a contract on it. I give them a maintenance manual, all that kind of stuff, and then we replicate the design on the wall. I would probably, with something like this, and I would think most artists working like this, they would have to have a painting in mind, or do a painting on large or small scale. Well, let me say this. They would either have to have a painting in their portfolio already that they think would be perfect for that site, and they would have to replicate it, or they would just agree and find a good property owner to say, I'm going to do something in the vein of this. At scale. It's going to have these colors. It's going to look sort of like this, but it's just going to be bigger and maybe different. And, you would just have to sort of both have sort of a leap of faith, the artist and the property owner, which it's not uncommon. I mean, that part of it is not that uncommon. It's just, finding the right person.
Right. That's very interesting. And for me, that's very interesting how your work connects to those ideas, because you seem to be putting out the questions, like with RFPs, in a very different vein than like a way that could be very directive, like for the type of work that really Pittsburgh, I don't know, I think Pittsburgh really needs is like the improvisational, the impressionistic, expressions. How could RFPs, what sort of RFPs would you be looking for in order to have that impressionistic style be valued? Or if you're writing the RFP, what would you say in there that would value that sort of work?
That's a really good question. And, like I sort of was talking about earlier, this type of work could absolutely be selected through Bakery Square. It could have been selected in Duolingo, but it typically isn't. just because it's hard to describe, but just seeing how jury members react and how property owners react, many times they navigate. When you have 160 applicants from around the world and you're trying to narrow them down to one person, typically what happens is you end up with like 3 really strong candidates, and any of them would be perfect. And then you're just splitting hairs, right? And then something happens and you just decide to go with the safest bet because it's a lot of money or whatever. And you just, improvisational, sort of experimental looking expressionistic artists just typically don't get chosen, because there's, all of that sort of at stake. So I think it would take I think it would take someone, either a property owner or a program manager like myself, really spending some time with, that perfect property owner or the new property owner, and sort of talking them into this kind of thing. And then using language in the call, just like in this current call, we've asked, anyone is eligible to apply, but we've strongly encouraged local and BIPOC artists, Black, Indigenous, people of color, to apply. Again, everyone's eligible, but we want those types of artists to know that they are welcome here, and we want them to apply. And it would be great if all things are equal, in the artwork and so forth, that we could get a local artist and an artist of color here. So the same thing could be done. You could narrow the focus of an RFQ on another project, where you could say we're only looking for painters, mm-hmm. and we would very much like to see street artists, or we'd very much like to see abstract expressionist or something like that. So you could do that. You could also, when you're working with a private developer like this, it's not the city government, it's not a nonprofit that has a board. So you can go tap, Joe Smith on the shoulder and just hire him. Like, you don't have to have an RFQ. So right. you can actually just directly solicit, a handful of artists, or you can just find an artist like this. So, again, it doesn't really, this type of art just doesn't bubble to the top in a lot of these processes, just for a lot of those reasons. But I think that I think it's something that is absolutely worth exploring.
Yeah, it just I think, because for me, that's exactly what the outside of Pittsburgh is missing, and it's just and I walk down the street and I just get frustrated a lot of times, because I'm like, really? Why can't this that I'm seeing, be something that's a part of the built environment,
Yeah. And, well, I can tell you, without saying too much, I tell people, if there's a pothole, if there's a pothole in Pittsburgh, I've stepped in it. A pitfall, I've stepped in it. So many times when you're running a project like the Sprout Mural Art program or the Philly Mural Arts program, a lot of, it becomes an institution after a while. And you have this mode where you're putting artists in dialogue with community members, just like I told you is appropriate, you should do that. But what happens is everyone has the best intentions, but then when the artist meets the community, they're like, oh, we would like to see the history of our neighborhood, or we would like to show, young people running around playing, in the streets, because it's safe, because that's what we aspire to be. And then the artist feels obligated to paint, that exact thing for the community. And that's why you end up with a lot of the community murals that sort of look similar, have similar things, like this is the history of our neighborhood, and here's a child holding a flower with, a sunbeam coming down, and illuminating them. I'm trying not to make fun of any of those, and I don't mean to make fun of those, but there are common tropes that come out because of that process. So I guess what I've learned in my travels is to try to change that process, and to the extent that I'm able to, I have done so. And that's one of the reasons why I find it liberating to work with Bakery Square right now and Duolingo in the past. On the one hand, it might be scary to some, young or not so young arts professionals working with a corporation, private corporation. But on the other hand, to date, they've really been hands off and allowed the artist to be the artist. They have not dictated to the artist what type of community process that they have. So again, with the process that we did with Ann Lewis at Duolingo, she just had conversations with those kids. But she didn't promise anybody she was going to depict the neighborhood's history or anything like that, and nor did they ask her to. And I think those high school kids, they're very smart. Anyway, I think they never even entered their minds, because they had a respect for the artists. So my work was very minimal. I didn't have to tell people how to treat that artist. It just sort of happened. So learning from a lot of those past mistakes that I have made, and not just mistakes, it's just the nature of the program. Right. Finding these,
finding the right communities for artists to interact with, I think is key. And in my case, sticking with the young people has worked out thus far. It's been good, and I hope to sort of escape some of those tropes that way.
Yeah, that's so. I'm really just glad you said that. Like, how to escape the tropes,
Yeah.
how to really get some beautiful work that allows the artist to be the artist, and get something beautiful. Get beautiful. Make the world a more beautiful place.
Yeah. I mean, I could go on for days about all, and I remember them all. And you know, it's always nice, right? The painting is pretty. It looks like you can't tear it down. Like, it's not terrible, but it's just, you know, you want to let the artist be the artist. You know, we hire them to be the artist. We don't hire them to be, you know, a person who listens or you know, someone who illustrates the history of the neighborhood. That's not what we hired them for. Although
that's a different project.
It's a different project, absolutely. So yeah, I think setting those expectations, and getting those communities in the right dialogue with the right people, I think is good.
Wow, that's a wonderful note to leave this on, you know, and finish up, to wrap up here. Thank you for joining. I really appreciate you joining and bringing Bakery Square along on the ride, and being so willing to do that, to back and forth, and Bakery Square asking you, and you getting back and just doing this with me. I really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate it too, and I should plug the program one more time before we get off. We have some dates. We have some dates coming up, and I thank you for giving me some time and showing my own artwork too. But this Thursday on the 21st, if you go to bakerysquareart.com, there's a link to an info session. So I'm going to be hosting a Zoom meeting this Thursday, the 21st at 6 p.m. via Zoom. If you email me, my contact is there on the website. I can hook you up with a calendar invite, or you can just enter through that website the night of. Then the application deadline is February 8th. So it's coming up pretty quickly. So I want, you know, every single artist that's within earshot. They can be from anywhere around the world and apply. They don't need to be a local artist. But we can't choose you if you don't apply. So we've got a really good jury, and I think we've got a good process, and I think the client's really good. I think they're really up for anything here. So I really want that exciting piece of art that we just talked about.
Wow. That's so exciting. So where can they find you one more time? And they can find Bakery Square PGH, right?
Yeah, it's just the Bakery Square website, but it's got an art section, so it's like bakerysquareart.com. There is in that website, there's a link for the information session.
It's just bakerysquare.com.
I think it's art.com.
If you go to Bakery Square, I'll put at Bakery Square I'm going to type this in, Bakery Square PGH send. All right, that's the Bakery Square PGH. That's where you can find it. And you can probably message them, right? Just DM them if you want that info.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, but once you get to the website, there's a link to apply, but there's also a link for just the information session. And the information session is not required, but if you want to come, there it is. And again, the link off that website goes to a submittable. So if you're used to the submittable application process, which a lot of people are, it's so simple. It's literally 5 minutes and you're in the door, and that's all you have to do.
Wow. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Do you want to leave us with some words of wisdom, some inspiration for the people who watch?
Yeah, keep making art. Keep making art. It's been the most trying time that any of us had ever imagined over this last year. But it's really inspiring to be here today talking to you on this special day for Martin Luther King, but also just to know that we made it and know that so many artist colleagues of mine have been making incredible art throughout this entire time. And I think we're all going to be back together soon and enjoy it together. So I'd say just don't stop, keep on going, and do what you can for your community.
Beautiful. Thank you, Morton.
All right, man. Take care.
We'll talk soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. I just want to thank you all for watching. I really appreciate you being here and going through and understanding and learning more about all these great artist opportunities. I'm really excited, and I hope you learned something about some different artist opportunities and how to maybe create some more opportunities for yourself through the process, through learning a little bit behind it. So thank you so much. Make sure to add me, Aaron Jack Line Art. Make sure to add Bakery Square PGH. Go check out Morton Brown. Amazing, really, really inspiring. So thank you so much. Yeah, that's it. bakery-square.com/art. That is it. So make sure to go follow them, follow everything that they're doing, because they're just doing an amazing job. So thank you for following. Thank you for watching. Happy Martin Luther King Day. Dream on. I'll see you on Thursday on the Freedom Tapestry Project. And tomorrow, I'll be back on with more artist art. Dream on.